Thank God. This incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend starting now. Krill flexed his 4 primary arms, admiring the reinforced netting in his claws. The trophy room aboard the Venatrix needed a new centerpiece. And today, finally, he would claim something worth displaying. Behind him, his crew of 7 chittered with anticipation, their scales rippling in shades of orange and crimson, the colors of excited predators closing in on a kill. Scanners confirm biological presence. Captain, announced Voss, his second in command. The younger hunter's tail whipped back and forth, betraying his eagerness despite his attempt at professional composure. Single entity, approximately 65 kilograms. No visible weapons. No armor. No defensive modifications. Whatsoever. Krill's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The hunting vessel descended through the atmosphere of Kepler 452b, a backwater that barely registered on civilized star charts. The place was a nightmare of excessive oxygen, unstable weather patterns, and gravity that pulled just a bit too hard. The kind of planet only desperate colonists or idiots would settle on. And yet here they were, tracking what appeared to be a lone wanderer separated from whatever pitiful settlement had spawned her. Deploy the dampening field. Krill ordered. I want her isolated. No communications, no chance of calling for help. Not that anything on this miserable rock could save her. Anyway. The ship's belly opened and Krill dropped through the hatch, his boots crunching against the orange-red soil. The air tasted wrong, too thick, too rich, burning slightly as it filled his respiratory slits. How anything survived breathing this toxic mixture was beyond his comprehension. The gravity made each step feel like he was wearing training weights. This planet was hostile to civilized life. Yet the readings insisted something lived here willingly. There, through the clustered rock formations, he spotted movement. A human. Krill had heard stories about humans, of course, everyone had. They came from a planet called Earth, a death world by any reasonable standard. And they had somehow convinced themselves they belonged among the stars. They were weak, fragile things, soft skin. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. No protective scales, just pale, thin flesh stretched over brittle bones. The fact that they had achieved space travel at all was a cosmic joke, a statistical anomaly that the universe would eventually correct. And here was a female specimen even more delicate than the males. If the intelligence reports were accurate. She was small, maybe 1.7 m tall with long dark hair pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothing, nothing reinforced. Nothing that suggested combat capability. She carried a pack on her back and appeared to be collecting samples from the rock pools scattered across the plateau. The scientist, perhaps, or just a fool with too much curiosity and not enough survival instinct. Surround her. Krill commanded through his comm unit. Tighten the circle. I want her trapped before she even knows we are. Here. His crew moved with practiced efficiency. 7 hunters against 1 unarmed target. The odds were almost insulting. But Krill had not survived 4 decades of hunting by taking chances. Overkill was just kill with a higher success rate. The human looked up. Her eyes, strange forward-facing things, locked onto Krill's position. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, he saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, not yet, something else. Assessment. Maybe. Calculation. Then his crew closed in and she did exactly what he expected. She ran. After her. Krill roared, the thrill of the chase igniting every nerve in his body. The human sprinted across the uneven terrain with surprising speed. Her legs pumping, her arms swinging for balance. But it was hopeless, laughably hopeless. Krill's species had been hunting prey across 17 star systems for generations. This soft, weak creature stood no chance. Voss launched the net from the flank, a perfect throw. The reinforced mesh spread wide, its weighted edges wrapping around the human's legs. She went down hard, hitting the ground with a cry of pain that made Krill's mandibles click in satisfaction. They had her. She struggled against the netting, her small hands pulling uselessly at the carbon fiber weave. Her breathing came in rapid gasps, her chest heaving. And then she did something that made the entire crew burst into derisive laughter. She screamed. Not a battle cry, not a threat, not even a coherent word, just a high-pitched, terrified scream that echoed across the barren plateau. "Oh, that is precious," wheezed Moxa, clutching his midsection as he laughed. "She thinks someone will hear her out here on this worthless rock. That is adorable." The human screamed again, louder this time, her voice cracking with apparent desperation. Krill approached slowly, savoring the moment. He stood over her, his shadow falling across her pale face. Tears streaked her cheeks. Her body trembled. She looked up at him with those bizarre forward-facing eyes, and he saw exactly what he wanted to see. Pure, unadulterated terror. "Welcome to the collection, little human," he said, knowing she could not understand his language. "You are going to look magnificent on my wall." She opened her mouth and screamed again. The crew laughed harder. The holding cell hummed with containment fields, blue energy crackling across the transparent barriers. Inside, the human sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, head down. She looked even smaller now, confined in the sterile chamber. Pathetic, really. Krill wondered why he had even bothered. Perhaps mounting her would seem less like a trophy and more like bullying. But the crew was celebrating, and he would not dampen their enthusiasm. "Bring the fermentation pods," shouted Grix, the weapons specialist. His scales flushed deep purple with intoxication. "We are drinking to Krill's newest acquisition." The trophy room was the pride of the Venatrix, a vast chamber lined with preserved specimens from across the galaxy. Krill's collection represented 30 years of hunting, each creature more dangerous than the last. There was the Thorian Berserker from Sigma 9, all 3M of fur and muscle frozen mid-raw. The crystalline serpent from the ice moons of Vendax, its fangs still dripping preserved venom. The six-legged apex predator from Verfrey Drax Prime, its claws extended as if still reaching for prey. And now, a human, the softest, weakest addition to his collection yet. "Tell me again." Moxa slurred, pressing his face close to the containment field. "How much did she weigh?" 65 kilograms. "My hatchlings weigh more than that." The human lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "Good." Fear meant adrenaline, and adrenaline meant the preservation process would capture that terrified expression perfectly. She would look beautiful mounted on the wall, forever frozen in her final moment of despair. She cried the entire flight back. Voss added, refilling his pod with amber liquid, blubbering like a newly spawned juvenile. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Krill clicked his mandibles in amusement. She is prey. Prey does not deserve sympathy. Prey deserves to be displayed, so that others might admire the hunter's skill. The human's mouth opened. At first, Krill thought she was going to cry again. Her lips trembled, her jaw worked, and her eyes squeezed shut. But what came out was not sobbing. It was a sound, low at first, barely audible over the crew's raucous celebration. A single sustained note that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Then it changed, rising and falling in a pattern that made Krill's ear membranes twitch uncomfortably. "What is she doing?" Grix asked, his laughter dying. The human's voice grew louder, not screaming this time, something else. Something rhythmic. Her throat worked, producing sounds that seemed to overlap. Harmonics layering over each other in ways that should not be possible from a single vocal apparatus. Maybe it is a prayer. Voss suggested. Some primitive religious ritual. They probably have gods for everything. God of bad decisions. God of getting captured by superior species. The crew laughed, but Krill noticed several of them had moved away from the containment field. The sound was unsettling. He had to admit, it resonated at a frequency that made his scales itch. The human paused, drew a deep breath, and the sound changed again. This time it was higher, sharper, modulating in rapid bursts. Her whole body tensed with the effort. Her hands clenched into fists, her face contorting. She sounds like a dying engine. Moxa observed, draining his pod. Someone shut her music up. The noise is ruining the celebration. Krill approached the control. panel and activated the vocal suppression field. A green light blinked, indicating the system was active. The technology worked by disrupting airflow, making speech impossible. The human kept making sounds. Krill's claws hovered over the controls. That should not be possible. The suppression field was specifically designed to prevent vocalizations. He checked the readings. The field was working perfectly, registering full power, complete coverage of the containment area. Yet the human continued her strange pattern noisemaking. How is she doing that? Voss asked, moving closer to the readouts. His earlier amusement had vanished, replaced by professional concern. I do not know. Krill admitted. The field should be preventing any sound production. Unless what? Unless she is not using her vocal cords the way we assumed. The human's eyes snapped open. She stared directly at Krell and something in her expression had changed. The terror was still there. Yes, but underneath it something else lurked. Something that made his predator. Instincts suddenly scream warning signals his conscious mind had not yet processed. She was not panicking. She was focused. The sounds continued, rising and falling in complex patterns. Her body swayed slightly, keeping rhythm with something only she could hear. Her lips moved, forming shapes that suggested language. But the sounds coming out were too layered, too complex, too deliberately structured. It sounds like code, Grigg said slowly. Like a transmission. Impossible, Krell snapped. We deployed the dampening field. No signals can leave this ship. And even if they could, who would she be calling? This is an isolated system. There are no human colonies within 3 light years. No human vessels. No stations. Nothing. The human smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something important. Something her captors had missed. Her vocalizations intensified. The patterns becoming more complex. More, Captain, Voss said, his voice tight. I recommend we sedate her. Now. Krell's claw moved toward the sedation controls. But before he could activate them, the ship's alarm system erupted in a cascade of warning tones. The human stopped making sounds. She sat back against the wall of her cell, chest heaving, sweat coating her pale skin. And she waited. Red emergency lights bathed the trophy room in crimson. The alarm wailed. A pulsing shriek that sent Krell's crew scrambling for their stations. Celebration forgotten, fermentation, Clear's throat, pods clattered to the floor, spilling their contents across the polished deck. Report, Krell barked. His claws already moving across the command interface embedded in his trophy room wall. Every chamber on the Venatrix had emergency access to ship systems. A paranoid design choice that was suddenly proving its worth. Multiple system failures. Captain. Called Voss from his position at the secondary console. His scales had gone pale grey, the color of deep fear. Navigation is offline. Weapons array is not responding. Life support is fluctuating. And the dampening field, the one we deployed to isolate this system, it just collapsed. Collapsed. That is a military-grade dampener. It does not just collapse. Well, it did 3 seconds ago. Complete failure across all frequencies. Krell's mind raced. Simultaneous system failures did not happen by accident. Not on a ship as well maintained as the Venatrix. Someone or something was attacking them. But how? They were alone in this system. The sensors had shown nothing. No ships. No stations. No threat. A sound echoed through the hall. It was faint at first, barely perceptible over the alarm. A rhythmic thumping like something striking the outer armor. Slow. Through. The ship's superstructure. What is that? Moxa asked, his weapon already drawn. Though what good a plasma rifle would do against something outside the ship was questionable. Scanning, Voss replied, his claws flying over the controls. I am getting readings, but they make no sense. Multiple objects. Close proximity. Moving patterns. They are surrounding us. The human laughed. It was not hysterical laughter, not the mad cackling of someone broken by fear. It was quiet, knowing, almost gentle. She remained seated in her cell, watching them with those forward-facing predator eyes. And she laughed like someone watching a performance they had seen before. Shut her up, Grigg snarled, raising his rifle toward the containment field. Belay that, Krell commanded. I want her conscious. I want answers. He strode to the containment field, his full height of 2.3 m towering over the seated human. She did not flinch, did not cower. She simply looked up at him and smiled that same unsettling smile from before. What did you do? Krell demanded, knowing she probably could not understand him, but needing to ask anyway. What are you? The human tilted her head as if considering whether to respond. Then she opened her mouth and began making sounds again. But these were different. Not the complex, layered harmonics from before. These were words. Actual words in galactic standard, heavily accented, but unmistakably clear. I called my family. Krell's blood went cold. You speak standard? I speak 7 languages, the human replied, her voice hoarse from the earlier vocalizations. Standard is actually one of my weaker ones. I am better at Mandarin and Corsa and the clicking languages of the Vex traders. But you know what I am really good at. She paused, and the thumping against the hull grew louder. Infrasound communication. That is not possible, Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. Biological entities cannot generate infrasound at transmission strength. The power requirements alone would require modifications. Yes, the human interrupted. Genetic modifications. Vocal cord augmentation. Resonance chamber implants. Subharmonic generators in the chest cavity. All standard equipment for humans operating in deep space exploration, especially those of us who work alone in dangerous territory. The ship shuddered. Something massive had just struck the hull. You were transmitting through our dampening field, Krell said slowly, pieces falling into place. That is why the suppression field did not work. You were not using normal vocal range correct. Your dampening field blocks standard. Electromagnetic frequencies. Radio. Quantum. Entanglement comes. Even basic laser pulse. But infrasound? She shook her head. Infrasound travels through solid matter. Through atmos, through vacuum if the frequency is low enough. It is how whales communicated across Earth's oceans. It is how elephants talked across savannas. And it is how humans in my line of work call for help when conventional communication is blocked. Help from where? Moxa demanded. There is nothing in this system. The human's smile widened. There was not anything in this system when you scanned 3 hours ago. But my family moves fast when one of us is in danger. And I have been transmitting my location, your ship signature, and a priority distress code since the moment you netted me on that plateau. The alarms changed pitch. New warnings cascaded across every display. Captain, Voss's voice cracked with panic. Sensors just came back online. I have multiple contacts. Correction, dozens of contacts. No, wait. Hundreds. They are appearing all around. Us. Ships. Fighters. Destroyers. Capital-class vessels. Where did they come from? How did they slip space? The human said calmly. We call it the Murphy drive. Humanity's gift to faster-than-light travel. We can drop out of slip space with pinpoint accuracy and zero warning. They are useful for surprise attacks or surprise rescues. She stood up, brushing dust from her clothing with exaggerated care. You made 3 mistakes today, she continued, her voice carrying over the chaos erupting around them. First, you assumed I was alone. Humans are never alone. We are pack hunters, social creatures. We take care of our own. Second, you assumed I was prey. And third, the biggest mistake of all, the thumping on the hull stopped. Silence fell over the ship, more terrifying than any alarm. Then came a new sound. The shriek of metal being torn apart. The hiss of cutting torches. The methodical, unstoppable sound of something breaching the Venatrix's hull. You assumed, the human said quietly, that screaming meant fear. Krell's claws trembled on his weapon. Around him, his crew stood frozen, listening to the sounds of their ship being systematically disassembled from the outside. The human began making sounds again. The same complex patterns as before. But now Krell understood what he was hearing. She was not screaming. She was talking, and something was answering back. The main viewport flickered to life, overriding Krell's control systems. Someone outside wanted them to see. Wanted them to understand exactly how badly they had miscalculated. Space was no longer empty. where there had been nothing but stars and the dim orange glow of Kepler 42b. There now hung a fleet. Not a patrol. Not a search party. A full military battle group. Krell's training allowed him to identify ship classes even through his rising. Panic. Destroyers. Frigates. Carrier. Vessels bristling with launch bays. And at the center, dwarfing everything else, a dreadnought that looked like it could crack a planet in half. By the ancestors, Grigg whispered. How many ships is that? 237, Voss read from his display, his voice hollow. 237 combat vessels, plus support craft, plus what looks like boarding shuttles. So many boarding shuttles. That is an invasion force, Moxa said. That is the kind of fleet you bring to conquer a star system. Not rescue one person. Not one single soft weak. She is not weak, Krell interrupted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. We were wrong. We were catastrophically, fatally wrong. The human in the containment cell continued her vocalizations. But now Krell could hear the structure in them. The patterns. She was communicating in real time. Transmitting through the hull, through space itself. Coordinating with the fleet that surrounded. The every rise and fall of her voice carried information, distance, threat assessment, status updates. She was not a victim crying for help. She was a soldier reporting to her unit. A new voice filled the bridge, transmitted through every speaker on the Venatrix simultaneously. It was human, male, speaking perfect galactic standard with an accent that suggested military training. Attention, unidentified vessel. You are completely surrounded by the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet of the Terran Colonial Marines. You are holding one of our people against her will. You have precisely 60 seconds to power down all weapon systems. Drop your shield and prepare for boarding. If you comply, you will be detained and processed according to Galactic Convention protocols. If you resist, we will tear your ship apart molecule by molecule until we reach her. Your choice. Clock starts now.